Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. My name is Joseph, and this is the story of how I discovered the truth about my wife, Melissa, and took back control of my life. Never in my life did I think I would be telling a story like this. Yet here I am, putting it all down in words. I know I'm not the only one to have gone through something like this. Many others have faced similar heartbreak. I had complete faith in my marriage. I trusted the woman I had committed my life to. For 9 years, I believed our relationship was unbreakable. But life has a cruel way of throwing unexpected punches when you least expect them. For nearly a decade, I was certain I knew Melissa inside and out. If there was one thing I understood about her, it was her love for well-thought-out surprises. She found joy in the smallest of gestures, the little acts of kindness that made her feel valued. So, as her birthday approached, I wanted to go beyond the usual dinner plans and create something truly special. I cleared my entire day, made arrangements for a private chef, and prepared a surprise she would never forget. While the chef worked his magic in the kitchen, I carefully arranged the dining space, ensuring that every detail contributed to an atmosphere of warmth and intimacy. The setting was perfect. I could already picture the moment she walked in, the scent of a gourmet meal filling the air, the candles casting a soft glow, the effort behind it all reflecting in her eyes. I imagined her turning to me with an expression that said, "You really went through all this for me?" I checked the time. She was supposed to be home in an hour. Everything was ready. What I didn't know was that this night, meticulously planned to make her feel special, would instead unravel everything I believed in. 1 hour turned into 2. Still, she hadn't arrived. This wasn't like her. She typically got home around 6:30, occasionally pushing it to 7 now. I hesitated to call, not wanting to ruin the surprise. Instead, I checked her location. Early in our marriage, we had shared our phone locations as a safety measure. I expected to see that she was on her way home, but instead, her phone showed her at a restaurant downtown. Maybe her friends or co-workers had taken her out to celebrate. I needed to be sure. If she had already eaten, my carefully planned meal might go to waste. Taking a deep breath, I called her. The phone barely rang twice before she picked up. "Hey, babe," she answered, her voice smooth and casual. "Hey," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Are you on your way home?" There was a brief pause, then a sigh. "Ugh, not yet. Work is insane today. I'm drowning in reports and I'll probably be stuck here late." My stomach nodded. She was lying. I stared at the location on my screen, confirming what I already knew. She wasn't at work. She was sitting in a restaurant while I sat at home, waiting with a carefully planned surprise. But I didn't react. Not yet. I forced a light chuckle and said, "All right, no problem. See you when you get home." As soon as I hung up, I remained still, my thoughts spiraling in every direction. What was I supposed to do now? I had 2 options: take her words at face value or see the truth with my own eyes. Every part of me wanted to believe there was some reasonable explanation, that she would call any moment saying she was on her way home. But that call never came. So I grabbed my keys and drove to the restaurant. The drive wasn't long, but every second felt like an eternity. My mind raced through endless possibilities. Was I overreacting? When I arrived, I spotted her through the large glass windows. She sat at a small table for 2, and she wasn't alone. Across from her, leaning in closely, was a man I recognized instantly, her colleague. The same one she had introduced me to at a work event months ago. The way they looked at each other, the way she laughed. It wasn't the kind of conversation co-workers had over dinner. Even if it had been an innocent meeting, why lie? Her office wasn't anywhere near this place. None of it made sense, unless there was something she wanted to hide. She smiled at him as though she were in the middle of some romantic movie, and I needed undeniable proof. I pulled out my phone and dialed her number. From where I stood, hidden in the shadows, I watched as her phone screen lit up on the table. She glanced at it, and for a brief second, I foolishly hoped she would answer. But instead, she exhaled, silenced the call, and placed her phone face down. She let it ring, treating my call like an inconvenient distraction. Then, she turned her attention back to him, as though I didn't exist. Something inside me broke. I didn't rush inside. I didn't confront her. I didn't create a scene. Instead, I quietly raised my phone, snapped a few discreet photos, and walked away. I drove home in silence, my mind completely numb. I don't even know how long I sat there in the dark, staring at nothing. Anger simmered inside me, but more than that, I felt lost. What was I supposed to do now? Confront her? Pretend I hadn't seen anything? I needed to talk to someone who could help me make sense of the chaos in my mind. I lifted my phone and scrolled to Alexander's contact. He had been my closest confidant since our college days, the one person who never sugarcoated the truth. As soon as he answered, I heard the shift in his voice. "Joseph, what's wrong?" he asked, already picking up on my unease. I hesitated for only a moment before the words spilled out. A heavy silence followed. Then, he exhaled slowly. "This isn't good," he admitted, his tone firm. "You can't just sit on this and hope it goes away. You need to get ahead of it. What if this has been happening longer than I realize? What if there's more than just one suspicious dinner?" His words weighed on me, exhaustion seeping into my bones. I dragged a hand down my face. "What do I even do?" "You need proof, Joseph. Undeniable, concrete proof. A private investigator can get that for you. That way, when you confront her, there's no room for lies or manipulation." That night, Melissa walked in past 10. I sat at the dining table, staring at the untouched meal. The candles had burned down to stubs, flickering weakly, their light casting shadows over the cold, neglected dinner. This wasn't how I had envisioned our evening. She sighed theatrically as she set her bag down near the entrance. Running a hand through her hair, she turned to me with a carefully rehearsed look of regret. "Babe, I'm so sorry," she murmured, her voice tinged with artificial remorse. "Work was insane today. The deadline got moved up, and I had no choice. I hated missing dinner." I didn't reply. I just watched. Every detail was perfect. The tone, the expression, the weary slump of her shoulders. The woman I had once trusted implicitly was standing there, weaving another lie as effortlessly as breathing. Swallowing down the bitterness rising in my throat, I kept my face unreadable. "It's fine," I said evenly. "Work can get like that." She stepped forward and pressed a kiss to my cheek. I resisted the urge to pull away, forcing myself to hold still. Instead, I offered a small, hollow smile and told her I had saved her some food. She shook her head. "I'm exhausted," she sighed. "I just need to sleep." Another lie. As she slept beside me, I made the call. By morning, I had an appointment with a private investigator. If my marriage was unraveling, I needed to see just how deep the cracks ran. Over the next month, I played my role. Each morning, I woke up next to her. We shared meals, exchanged conversations about her job, went through the motions of a life that, to her, still appeared intact. But I knew better. I knew she was living a separate existence beyond these walls. The investigator worked efficiently. Within 2 weeks, he had compiled more than enough evidence: photos, videos, timestamps, proof of Melissa meeting the man she had once casually introduced as a colleague. Their encounters weren't confined to hotels. They met in cafes, bars, and quiet corners of the city. Sometimes they simply sat in her car for hours, speaking in hushed voices. This wasn't a fleeting affair. It was a meticulously maintained deception. Then came the final, cruel irony. The other man was married too. His wife was oblivious. While she stayed home caring for their children, her husband was out betraying her, just as Melissa was betraying me. The symmetry of it all was almost darkly poetic. Two people leading double lives, deceiving the ones who had given them their trust. When the investigator handed me the final report, I held everything I needed. Photos, detailed records, irrefutable evidence. I could have exposed them both, shattered their reputations with a single move. But I didn't. Melissa wasn't just another employee at her firm. She held a position of influence, admired by her colleagues and superiors. If her affair became public, it wouldn't just be a personal scandal. It would be a career-ending disaster. The company had strict policies against relationships between employees of different ranks. If this reached HR, she could face demotion, termination, or even legal repercussions from the other man's wife. But revenge wasn't my goal. I wanted control. I wasn't going to let this turn into a protracted battle over assets or a drawn-out legal war. I needed a clean break on my terms. And now, I had the leverage to ensure that when I walked away, I did so with my dignity and everything else I deserved. If Melissa refused to sign the divorce papers quietly, I knew exactly where to send the proof. That evening, she returned late again. The same pattern, the same excuses. She sighed dramatically as she dropped her bag onto the counter. You wouldn't believe the day I had. Work was a nightmare. I didn't reply right away. I just watched her, letting the silence stretch. For weeks, I had nodded along, played my role, pretended. But not tonight. Tonight, it ended. Melissa, I said at last, my voice calm but unyielding. There's no reason to keep pretending anymore. I reached across the table, pulling the folder toward her. Beside it, I set down a neatly stacked pile of papers, the finalized divorce agreement. Melissa's brows knit together, confusion flickering across her face before giving way to something else. Fear. Her eyes darted to the folder, but she made no move to touch it. What is this? She murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Holding her gaze, I didn't waver. Two choices, I stated calmly. Sign the papers, and we part ways quietly. No drama, no unnecessary struggle. Or, I tapped the folder. This goes to your company's HR, your co-workers, and your lover's wife. Her face drained of color. She didn't need to open it. She already knew what was inside. She shook her head, instinctively retreating as if distance could change what was in front of her. Joseph, please, it's not what you think. Her voice trembled. Just let me explain. I remained silent. I had heard enough lies. Her breathing quickened, and with unsteady hands, she reached for the folder. She flipped it open. Photos, recordings, proof beyond denial. The tears came instantly. Whether they were real or just another act, I no longer cared. It was a mistake, she sobbed, skimming through the damning evidence. A stupid, meaningless mistake. It meant nothing. I never wanted to lose you. I swear. I exhaled slowly, the familiarity of her words almost laughable. I love you, she whispered, stepping closer, her fingers searching for mine in desperation. Please, Joseph, we can fix this. I'll end it. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't do this. I glanced at her hands, then back at her face. My fingers curled away from her touch. This isn't about love, Melissa, I said, my voice cold. It's about respect, and you lost mine. For a long moment, she stood motionless, her eyes flickering between me and the papers. I could see the war raging inside her. It wasn't our marriage she was mourning. It was the threat to her reputation, her career, the pristine image she had so carefully cultivated. Leaning back, I crossed my arms. Sign them, I instructed, my tone firm. Or we do this the hard way. Her lips parted as if to protest, but no words followed. Instead, she wiped her tears, sniffled, and picked up the pen. Her hand trembled as she signed, but in the end, she signed. Placing the pen down, she looked at me one last time, her voice subdued. "You swear you won't send it?" I nodded. "As long as you don't make things difficult." She bit her lip, hesitating, but she had nothing left to bargain with. She had played her cards and lost. Just like that, it was over. The woman I once envisioned a lifetime with was now nothing more than a closed chapter. She couldn't twist the story, couldn't shift the blame, couldn't paint herself as the victim. The worst part for her wasn't losing me. It was losing control of the narrative. She let out a shaky breath, wiping away the remnants of her tears. "What do I tell people?" she asked quietly. I shrugged. "That's up to you." Her brow creased, as though she had expected a kinder exit. Maybe she thought I'd offer her a convenient excuse, something neat and simple to feed to friends and family, like we drifted apart or life took us in different directions. But I wasn't here to make things easy for her. She would have to craft her own explanation, without distorting the truth. The best part? She couldn't drag my name through the mud. If she tried, I had the evidence to set the record straight. Looking back now, I see everything with clarity. Melissa never stayed for love. She stayed for comfort, for the security, for the illusion of stability that marriage gave her. She liked what we had, but not enough to be loyal to it. And that's the cruel truth about betrayal. You can pretend it isn't happening, but eventually, reality forces you to open your eyes. For years I feared losing her would break me. But in the end, staying would have been the true defeat. Staying would have meant accepting a lie, devaluing myself, allowing someone else's choices to dictate my worth. I walked away with my dignity intact, which meant I didn't lose. I may have lost a wife, but I reclaimed my life. If there's anything to take from my story, it's this: trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't ignore it. The signs were always there. I just didn't want to acknowledge them. But the truth doesn't bend to our wishes. It waits, unchanging, until we're ready to face it. And when that moment comes, remember this: actions speak louder than words. People will say anything to keep you where they want you. They will lie, just like Melissa did, because words are easy. But actions? That's where the truth is revealed. Above all, never let someone's deceit trap you in a fabricated reality. I spent too long trying to make sense of the senseless. But at the end of the day, cheating isn't an accident. It's a choice. And I had a choice too. Let it destroy me or walk away and rebuild. So if you ever find yourself in this position, know your worth. Don't beg for love. Don't tolerate betrayal. And never ever stay where you are not respected. You deserve better. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you. Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. My name is Zachary, and this is the story of how I learned, through heartbreak, that love alone is never enough, especially when the person you treasure most stops valuing you before realizing their mistake. I met Melissa in our early 20s, and from the start, we were inseparable. We had the kind of chemistry that made people believe in fate, a connection so natural it felt like we had always known each other. We spent endless nights talking until the sun came up, took long drives beneath star-lit skies, and built a world where only we existed. When we finally exchanged vows, it felt inevitable. We had dreams, big ones, traveling the globe, creating a future together, and maybe one day raising a family. For a while, everything was just as we had imagined. Then, reality stepped in. I threw myself into building my business, working tirelessly to turn my goals into something real. But no matter how demanding my days became, Melissa was always my priority. I made sure she felt loved, whether through spontaneous date nights, small surprises, or simply taking the time to sit down and listen to her. She was my anchor, my safe place. In the beginning, she saw that. She was my biggest cheerleader, always by my side, encouraging me. But over time, something changed. It began with small comments about wanting more space, craving independence. I understood. Everyone needs room to grow. But soon, I realized she wasn't searching for balance. She was prioritizing herself in every way, disregarding what that meant for our marriage. She stopped trying. Our shared plans became irrelevant. She barely acknowledged my day, yet expected me to treat her like she was still the center of my world. It was as if she wanted the comforts of marriage without the effort or commitment it required. At first, I reassured myself that all couples face difficult phases. So, like any devoted husband, I did my best to fix it. I avoided fights, choosing my words carefully. If something upset me, I spoke softly, and if she got defensive, I swallowed my frustration instead of pushing back. I tried to remind her of my love through gestures, flowers, little gifts, even the expensive handbag she had been admiring for months. Anything to remind her that I was still here, still devoted. But none of it mattered. She would thank me, but the words were hollow. Her smiles lacked warmth, her gratitude felt rehearsed. She'd accept the gifts and then drift right back into her own world, more interested in her phone than in me. When she finally said she needed space, that she had to rediscover herself, I didn't fight it. I thought that maybe if I stepped back, she'd remember what we had. So, I let her go out more, gave her the freedom she wanted. I stopped trying so hard, hoping she'd realize what she was losing. But as time passed, the gap between us only widened. It was as if she had rewritten our story in her head. She was the protagonist, and I was just a background character. Someone to meet her needs, but never truly worthy of her love. She began acting as though settling down with me had been a mistake, as if she was meant for something, or someone, greater. That realization shattered me. Watching the woman I had once been so deeply connected to pull further away, convincing herself she deserved more, made me question everything. When you love someone who no longer sees your value, it warps your perception of yourself. I found myself wondering if she was right. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I was the problem. I spent night after night staring at the ceiling, searching for answers. When had I stopped being what she needed? Where had I gone wrong? But deep down, I already understood. No matter how much love I poured into our marriage, I couldn't hold on to someone who had already let go, and I was running out of strength to pretend everything was fine. Then came the night that changed everything. I had been waiting for hours, watching the clock, listening to the quiet hum of passing cars. Melissa coming home late wasn't unusual anymore, but something about that night felt different. When the front door finally creaked open, I exhaled, bracing myself. I wasn't looking for another argument. I was too exhausted. She stepped inside, unsteady on her feet, the sharp scent of alcohol lingering around her before she even spoke. She didn't even glance at me. She dropped her bag onto the couch, kicked off her shoes, and carried on as if I wasn't there. Swallowing my frustration, I finally asked, "Melissa, do you even realize what you're doing? This isn't just about coming home late. You're shutting me out. I've been patient, but you're acting like this marriage doesn't exist." She rolled her eyes, letting out a laugh, sharp, dismissive. Then with a smirk, she scoffed. "Oh, please," she said with a sneer. "You actually think I need you? You actually believe you're indispensable? There's no shortage of men who want me. If you walk away, I'll have someone else by tomorrow." Her words struck deep, but I refused to flinch. She wasn't done. Lifting her chin, she continued with unwavering confidence. "I'm finished living by your expectations or anyone else's. This is my life, and no one, not you, not society, gets to dictate my choices. I'm stepping into my baby girl era, Zachary. Take it or leave it." That was the moment everything became clear. Whether I had lost her, or she had lost me, no longer mattered. The woman standing before me was a stranger, someone entirely different from the person I had once called my wife. I saw no reason to argue, no purpose in begging her to reconsider. She had already made up her mind, so I made up mine. I walked away. The next morning, I contacted the best divorce lawyer I could find. I wasn't interested in drawn-out proceedings or unnecessary conflict. I wanted a clean break. With no children to complicate things and no attachment to possessions or finances, the process moved quickly. Fairness? That wasn't my concern. I only wanted out. I didn't even bother showing up to the final meeting. My lawyer handled it all, and as soon as the papers were signed, I followed through on my decision. I disappeared. No calls, no messages, no lingering words of closure. Just silence. At first she seemed unfazed, almost relieved. To her, this was a fresh start, a new chapter of independence. Social media confirmed as much. Photos of wild nights out, drinks in hand, surrounded by an entourage. Every caption screamed self-liberation, filled with affirmations about new beginnings and self-love. For a while, it looked as though she had moved on effortlessly. She dove headfirst into the dating scene, and plenty of men were eager to entertain her. But reality didn't unfold the way she had envisioned. She wasn't the prized catch she had once believed herself to be. Sure, she attracted attention, but not the kind she had expected. The men who pursued her sought nothing more than a fleeting thrill, while those willing to commit weren't the type she wanted. I didn't witness it firsthand, but word made its way back to me. She cycled through relationships, each one more temporary than the last. The excitement wore off. The validation that had once fueled her began to feel empty, and for the first time, she wasn't alone by choice, not for self-discovery or personal growth, but because she had driven away the one person who had truly loved her. How do I know? We had mutual friends. Some still kept in touch with her. As for me, I never looked back. After the divorce, I had a decision to make. I could have distracted myself with meaningless flings, sought out short-term highs to dull the emptiness, but that wasn't what I needed. I had spent too many years in a marriage where I felt invisible. Now, it was my turn to put myself first. And that's exactly what I did. I channeled everything into my business, building it into something stronger than before. Work became more than just a paycheck. It became proof of my capability, my purpose beyond being someone's husband. Success followed. My company flourished in ways I never imagined, and for the first time in years, I felt in control of my own life. Beyond work, I prioritized myself, physically, mentally, emotionally. I hit the gym, not just for appearances, but to regain my strength. I fixed my sleep, took care of my health, and focused on my well-being. And in the process, I learned a crucial lesson. Some people will never appreciate you, no matter how much you give. I refused to settle for anything that didn't add real value to my life. I wouldn't let loneliness push me back to something unhealthy, nor would I chase empty relationships just to fill the silence. I learned how to be alone, without feeling lonely. And in that solitude, I thrived. Years passed before our paths crossed again. It wasn't planned. Just another ordinary day, running errands, moving through a department store without much thought. Then, I turned a corner. There she was. Melissa stood just a few feet away, a shopping bag in her grip, staring at me like she had seen a ghost. For a brief moment, I barely recognized her. She still looked good. She had always taken care of herself, but something in her eyes had shifted. Her gaze flickered over me, hesitation clear in her expression before she finally spoke. Zachary. I met her eyes with a polite nod, offering a faint smile. Melissa. It's been a while. She let out a nervous laugh, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Yeah, it really has. She regarded me with a slight tilt of her head, her expression laced with curiosity. You seem different. I gave a casual shrug. Yeah. Life's been good to me. She leaned in just a bit, her questions coming in quick succession, as if trying to keep the conversation from fading into an awkward lull. "How have you been? What's new with you?" I answered without hesitation, keeping my responses light, offering just enough but never more than necessary. I wasn't cold, but I also wasn't giving her what she was searching for. Whatever was running through her mind, I couldn't begin to guess. After a few minutes of small talk, she hesitated, then offered a tentative smile. "Maybe we could catch up sometime?" I mirrored her smile, my tone equally ambiguous. "Yeah, maybe." But we both knew it was an empty suggestion. That chapter of my life had long since closed, the door locked behind it. A few days passed before she reached out again. A simple text, one of those polite, "Hey, it was nice seeing you the other day" messages. I stared at my phone, fingers hovering over the keyboard. For a moment, I considered leaving it unanswered, but despite my better judgment, I replied. From there, the conversation found a rhythm, slowly gaining traction. Nothing heavy, nothing deeply personal, just light-hearted messages, revisiting old memories, filling the spaces where bitterness and pain had once taken root. Over the following weeks, our exchanges became sporadic but steady. Occasionally, she would send a message about something that reminded her of me. And though I tried to ignore it, I couldn't deny the truth to myself. The feelings still lingered. Love doesn't simply dissolve overnight, but as time passed, I came to a realization. Love alone had never been enough. Trust? That had been shattered long ago. One evening, she suggested we meet. Just a casual dinner. Just to talk. I won't lie, it was tempting. A part of me wanted to say yes. But before I could type a response, I forced myself to confront the question I had been avoiding all along. Why? Was I looking for closure? An apology? Some kind of explanation for everything that had happened? Was I holding on to some last fragile hope that we could rebuild what had already turned to dust? The answer settled like a weight in my chest. I didn't need her to close this chapter for me. That was something I had to do on my own. So I said no. Not out of anger, not out of spite. Just a simple, "I don't think that's a good idea." It took me longer than I'd like to admit to fully understand the scars she left behind. It wasn't just about how she walked away. It was about how she made me feel before she did. Unworthy, disposable, never enough. I told myself I was fine. I drowned myself in work, hit the gym more often, surrounded myself with friends. But no matter how busy I kept, there was always that underlying heaviness, an invisible weight pressing down on me. And I knew that if I didn't face it, it would seep into every part of my life. So I did something I never thought I would. I went to therapy. At first, it felt unnatural, sitting across from a stranger, peeling back emotions I had buried for years. But little by little, the fog lifted, and I began to understand. Loving Melissa hadn't been my mistake. Fighting for my marriage hadn't made me weak. I had simply given my heart to someone who was never meant to keep it. That wasn't a failure. It was a lesson. Healing wasn't some grand revelation. It didn't happen overnight. It was a process, a series of quiet, personal victories. And part of that journey meant letting go completely. No more texts, no more lingering conversations, no more what-ifs. Our story had reached its final page. Before I erased her number from my phone, I sent one last message. Not in bitterness, not in anger, just in honesty. I wish you the best. Looking back, I used to think the only way to truly move on was to prove something. To make the person who hurt you realize what they lost, to make them regret their choices. But along the way, I learned something far more valuable. Revenge is meaningless. Wasting energy trying to prove a point is just that, a waste. The real triumph? Moving forward, becoming the best version of yourself, and letting them watch from a distance. That's exactly what I did. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.